Now, number two, it's commonly assumed that working with clients in the community is going to be effective because you're often working one-on-one. You don't have such great fears of security as you do in a prison setting. And in many jurisdictions, probation and parole officers see themselves as trying to be helpers more so than security surveillance enforcers. The question is, does it work? Does community supervision work? Well, we conducted a meta-analysis and there's the results. Impact on general recidivism, hardly any, 0.02. No impact on violent recidivism. This is our summary of studies that compare people who are under community supervision and those, a matched group who are not. Perhaps they just got fines or something. So community supervision appears to have a minimal impact. Again, I asked the question why, but this time I'm not going to look at my undergraduate professor for the answer. What you need to do is look more closely at what probation and parole officers actually do. Well, there are a number of studies looking at this, and 3/4 of their time is spent in non-face-to-face contact, writing reports, making sure that they're coming in on time in the evening, so on and so forth. About 25% of a probation parole officer's time is spent with seeing the client. And we have the general term providing counseling. But what's the form of this counseling? Well, we actually did a study in the province of Manitoba where we asked 62 probation officers to audio record their sessions. And we also were allowed to review their files. And we basically wanted to ask those 3 questions and see whether or not they're following RNR in their face-to-face, one-on-one sessions with the clients. So, what did we find? Not too good application of the risk principle. Notice here that medium risk clientele were seeing less than low risk clientele. And this is despite a policy within the province to follow the risk principle. Devote more of your time to the higher risk and minimize time with the low risk. Now, what about the need principle? Well, those are some very important criminogenic needs. And what we find is the average probation officer in this study anyways, spends a fair amount of time discussing substance abuse issues and family marital issues. But some of the other areas, criminogenic needs, are less likely to be discussed or addressed in supervision studies. Look at attitudes. This is basically pro-criminal attitudes. It's hardly ever addressed in these supervision sessions. Now, what about responsivity? What about following cognitive behavioral interventions? Probation officers were very good at providing pro-social reinforcement to their clients, but when we examine other cognitive behavioral interventions, they become much less frequent. And look at the bottom. Now, this is going to become very important later on when I discuss STICS, cognitive restructuring. What that means is addressing the pro-criminal thinking of the client, getting the client to recognize, oh, this kind of thinking, it's okay to steal, can lead to behavioral difficulties. And then what you need to do is replace those pro-criminal thinking patterns with pro-social thinking patterns. And this is a very important technique in all cognitive behavioral interventions. And what we find, it was never, ever evident in this study. When you look at what goes on behind closed doors in a probation office with respect to following the principles of RNR, we find very poor adherence to that.